For 45 years, my biggest fear was being fired. It turns out the day I chose to leave on my own terms was much, much harder. I quit my job at 71, and the harshest reality wasn't losing the paycheck or the title or even the routine. It was the terrifying silence I found. My last day was, a blur of cake and people signing a card and a lot of awkward handshakes. Everyone saying, "Enjoy your freedom, you've earned it." I came home, put my briefcase by the door for the last time, and the following Monday at 9 in the morning, I sat down in my favorite chair with a fresh cup of coffee, and I waited. I waited for this big wave of bliss to wash over me. Instead, I just felt nothing. The phone didn't ring, not once. My email inbox was completely empty. The entire world that I had managed just 72 hours before had moved on without creating a single ripple. And I want to be perfectly clear about something. I am one of the fortunate ones. My financial plan was solid. This isn't a story about surviving poverty. It's about surviving yourself when your reason for getting out of bed for almost half a century just disappears. I felt like I was failing at retirement, and the shame of that, the guilt of not being blissfully happy, was surprisingly heavy. But that initial shock, that was just the curtain raiser for a much more subtle, and in some ways much harsher, reality. It's the tyranny of the unstructured day. That's what nobody prepares you for. In my second month of freedom, I remember trying to be spontaneous. I got in the car and just drove. I ended up at one of those huge hardware stores, the size of an airplane hangar. I didn't have a list. I didn't need anything. I was just looking. I was walking down an aisle looking at rows and rows of screws when a young employee, maybe 20 years old, came up to me. "Can I help you find something, sir?" And I said, "No thanks, just looking." He gave me this look. It wasn't mean, it was worse. It was polite, professional, and filled with a kind of gentle pity. It was the look you give to something that is harmlessly in the way. In that one look, I saw exactly what I was. Just another retired guy killing time. A ghost haunting the aisles of a hardware store on a Tuesday afternoon. I felt a wave of shame so hot it felt like my skin was burning. I, the man who used to manage a global supply chain, had no purpose. Not even the purpose of buying a single screw. I mumbled something and walked out. I didn't buy a thing. If you find yourself wandering your own home like a ghost, opening the refrigerator for the 10th time without being hungry, please know it's not because you're lazy or because you failed. It's because the entire scaffolding of your life was removed overnight, and nobody ever gave you the tools or the blueprint to build a new one. We think having no decisions to make is freedom, but it's the opposite. It's exhausting. It reminds me of something I read years ago from Viktor Frankl, who survived the Holocaust. He said that purpose, even in the smallest of things, is what keeps us alive. And this feeling of being adrift, of being useless even to yourself, that leads to the most dangerous part of this new reality. And I know this all sounds incredibly heavy, because it is. And for months I just felt like I was drowning in it, without a landmark in sight. But then, very slowly, something started to shift. It wasn't a single event. It was the moment I finally recognized this feeling for what it was. It wasn't just boredom, it was a withdrawal, a legitimate physical and emotional withdrawal from a 45-year addiction to being useful. And that realization, that was the beginning of a map. Not some perfect printed map, but a hand-drawn one, with a lot of smudges and erased lines. What I want to share with you now are the few things I figured out along the way, the things that actually started to help me draw that map. It isn't a magic formula. It's just the story of how I started to find my way back, one small step at a time. The change didn't start with a grand plan. It started with a simple question from my wife one evening. She asked me what I'd done all day, and I had no real answer. I had existed. I had passed time. And the look on her face wasn't disappointment. It was worry. That was the moment. The next morning, I did something different. I took out a notepad and wrote down a list of 3 embarrassingly small, concrete things I could do. The third item on that list was organize the garage. It took me a whole week. It was dusty, my back ached, and it was the most unglamorous work you can imagine. But at the end of that week, I stood there looking at neatly labeled shelves and tools hanging in their proper places. My wife came out, looked around, and just said, "Wow." It wasn't a standing ovation from a boardroom, but it was real. I had imposed order on a small corner of my own chaos. And that's when it finally clicked for me. I realized that for decades my career had been like a giant finished skyscraper, and when I retired it wasn't remodeled. It was demolished, overnight, and I was left standing on an empty plot of land. And the harsh truth was, I wasn't the building manager anymore. I was a lone bricklayer. That garage, that was me laying a single brick. And I understood my new job wasn't to come up with some grand new blueprint. It was just to lay one brick, and then another. One brick might be a walk around the block. The next is a phone call to a friend. They're small and heavy, and it's not exciting work. But you can hold them in your hand. They're real. And you start to build again. Laying bricks. That became the job. And now I know what you might be thinking. Okay, so you organized your garage, then what? Did you start a nonprofit? Write a novel? That's the kind of pressure we put on ourselves, isn't it? The pressure to replace a 45-year career with an equally impressive retirement project. The truth is much smaller and much harder. Some days I would lay a brick. I'd go for that walk or call that friend, and I'd feel okay, not ecstatic, just solid. But the withdrawal from being useful, that's a powerful thing, and it's sneaky. My son called me one afternoon, totally frustrated with a contractor who was working on his kitchen, and for 20 minutes I was back, the old me. I was listening, asking the sharp questions, laying out a strategy for him. My mind was clear, I was focused, I was needed. It felt like a drug, a jolt of the most powerful thing I'd ever known. And after we hung up, the silence in my house felt 10 times louder. The high was gone, and I spent the rest of the day chasing that feeling, trying to find another problem to solve. Anyone's problem. Just to get that feeling back. That ache you feel when you realize you're no longer the go-to person. That is a legitimate withdrawal symptom. For decades, many of us were addicted to being useful, and now we're going cold turkey. And if you think I'm being dramatic, I'm not. I read about a study from the University of Michigan that found a direct link between a person's perceived lack of purpose and their mortality rate. They actually called it the purpose mortality link. When we feel useless, our bodies can literally interpret that as a signal to start shutting down. It's not just in our heads. This stuff is real. Recognizing this, that it was an actual withdrawal, was the real turning point for me. It wasn't about finding a new job. It was about redefining what useful even means. And this led me to what I guess you could call Plan C. Plan A was my career. Plan B was the fantasy of a blissful, carefree retirement. That one blew up on the launch pad. Plan C is the hard, boring work of building something new, something small, something that is entirely my own. It reminds me of that famous speech by a U.S. Navy Admiral, William McRaven. He said you should make your bed every morning. His point was that starting your day with one completed task, no matter how small, gives you a little jolt of pride and encourages you to do another task, and then another. It's not about the bed. It's about proving to yourself first thing in the morning that you are still an agent of action in your own life. You are still a cause, not just an effect. So now my most successful days are make your bed days. Organizing the garage was just making a very big, dusty bed. And if the idea of starting some grand retirement project feels completely overwhelming to you, I promise you are not alone. The secret isn't a big plan. It's a small, boring, repeatable action that you can own from start to finish. So, what is the harsh reality of my life today? It's probably not what you think. So, what is the harsh reality of my life today? It's probably not what you think. It's not a story you'd see on a magazine cover. There's no sailboat, no picture of a blissfully happy, silver-haired couple toasting their good fortune. The harsh reality of my life today is, it's a patchwork. It's messy. It's a collection of small, quiet purposes that have been stitched together over time. Some days those stitches hold together beautifully. I'll have that weekly lunch with my old colleague. We'll solve all the world's problems over a bad sandwich, and I'll walk home feeling connected, solid. Those are the good brick days. But there are other days. Other days the void is still there. It just knocks on the door a little more quietly now. There are still Tuesdays where I'll find myself just staring out the window, feeling that old familiar pull of irrelevance. The difference is I recognize it now. I see it for what it is. It's not a final verdict on my life. It's just the weather. And I know the weather changes. And I think that is the real harsh reality. It's that this is work. Building a new life after the old one was demolished. It's work. In so many ways, it's harder than my old job ever was, because this time, there's no boss to tell you what to do next. There's no instruction manual. And there's no paycheck at the end of the week to let you know if you're doing it right. The only feedback you get is from the quiet in your own head. And please, don't let me fool you. This isn't a happily ever after story. I haven't figured it all out. And this is just my path. Some people retire and they want to start a business or travel the world, and that's fantastic. It's just not my map. My map is much smaller, and I'm still drawing it every single day. The reality isn't harsh because it's bad. It's harsh because it's real. And you can't delegate real. You can't outsource building your own life. So in the end, I'm no longer the manager of that skyscraper. That building, that whole identity is gone for good. I'm just a lone bricklayer standing here on the empty plot of land where it used to be. The work is slow. It's not glamorous. But here's the thing I'm learning about laying bricks. You can't fake it. You can't just talk about it in a meeting. You have to pick one up, feel its weight, and set it in place, and then do it again. My old job gave me a title. This new life is forcing me to build a character, one brick at a time. And I would genuinely love to know what your work looks like, what your bricks look like. So forget the big, overwhelming plans for a moment. What is the one brick, that one small, simple action that you can lay for your new life tomorrow? Let me know in the comments below. I'll be reading them, because I think we can all use a little inspiration for what brick to lay next. If this is a conversation you feel like you want to be a part of, maybe stick around. There's a lot more to build.